I wanted to share something scary that happened to me and my friends last weekend. It was me, Jake, and Mike. We usually hang out and travel together. I'm usually the planner, the one who organizes our trips down to the last detail. Jake is the life of the party, always ensuring everyone's having fun with extra snacks and games. Then there's Mike, the adventurous one, always pushing us to try new and exciting things. Mike suggested we rent this awesome Airbnb with a big backyard, perfect for a little break. Splitting the cost made it affordable, and honestly, the place was even better than it looked online. It was a one-story house with big glass windows all around. It had a huge space behind the house, perfect for a night under the stars. The windows gave us a clear view into the house from the backyard, so we thought it would be fun to camp out in the backyard instead of staying inside the house the whole time. We set up our tents and got everything ready. It looked like it was going to be an awesome weekend. At least that's what we thought. Before heading outside, we did a quick check of the Airbnb to make sure everything was as described. The place was decorated nicely, with a modern yet rustic look that matched our camping vibe. There was a large living space that opened up to a kitchen with a breakfast bar, which looked really nice in the evening light. We left our stuff inside the house and grabbed some drinks from the fridge to have by our tents. It was around 1 a.m. and most of us were either relaxing or starting to doze off. I was just lying there, enjoying the cool evening breeze and looking up at the stars, thinking how peaceful everything was, which, looking back, feels kinda ironic now. Jake's phone rang loudly, and he immediately muted it, his face turning a bit red. Without a word, he got up and slipped away to take the call. We all knew it was his girlfriend, Savannah, on the line. We couldn't help but laugh. We always teased Jake about how whenever he talked to his girlfriend, he'd sneak off to a spot where no one could hear him. Some time passed, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, as I continued lying there, lost in my thoughts. I was just about to drift off when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. Through the big glass windows of the house, I saw someone moving inside. The lights were off, and the only illumination came from the backyard lamps, casting faint shadows everywhere. The fridge door opened slowly, spilling a soft light into the room. I thought it was Jake grabbing a snack or drink after his call, but we already had plenty of snacks and drinks. Why would he need more? Mike and I kept talking softly among ourselves, not thinking much of it. I watched as the figure moved through the kitchen and into the living room, the soft glow from the fridge fading as the door closed. Minutes later, Jake came back from the side of the house, still holding his phone. I was about to joke about his late-night talks with his girlfriend when I looked through the window again. To my shock, I saw the figure still moving inside, their shadow now passing through the curtains in one of the bedrooms. I almost jumped out of my seat as I pointed towards the house and said, "There's someone inside the house." Mike and Jake didn't believe me at first, thinking I was pulling their leg or something, but their laughter faded quickly when they saw the serious look on my face. We all stared at the house, our hearts pounding. Mike grabbed his phone, ready to call the police, but Jake stopped him. "Wait," he said, his voice tense. "Let's make sure it's not some kind of mistake." We gathered up some courage and crept towards the house, staying close together. The closer we got, the more real the situation felt. We reached the back door, which we had left open earlier, but to our shock, it was now locked from the inside. The fact that whoever was inside had locked it to keep us out made the situation even more terrifying. Jake suggested we try the front door. We made our way around the house. When we reached the front, though, Jake immediately stopped in his tracks, eyes wide with shock. "There," he whispered urgently, pointing towards the house. We saw the person rushing out of the front door, leaving it wide open behind him. In his hand, he was holding a bag of some kind, swinging as he sprinted away into the night. Without thinking, Jake raced after him. I tried to stop him, but he was already chasing the intruder down the dark street. Moments later, a gunshot echoed through the night, freezing us in place. My heart skipped a beat. We watched in horror as Jake stopped dead in his tracks and quickly sprinted back towards us, eyes wide with terror. "He's armed!" Jake gasped as he reached us, panting. "We need to get inside now!" We hurried inside the house, slamming the front door behind us. The gravity of the situation hit us hard. The intruder wasn't just a regular thief. He was dangerous and willing to use his weapon. The house felt different, violated. Drawers were open, and our belongings were spread across the floor. The intruder had clearly been searching for something specific. My heart pounded as we moved from room to room, taking stock of what was gone. Jake's laptop, Mike's watch, my backpack, and some items from the fridge. It was clear that the bag the intruder had taken was filled with our stuff. The thief was brave and made us look stupid. He broke into the house while we were in the backyard, and we had no idea he was there. He had the guts to keep going through our stuff, even though there were 3 of us just outside. It was like he didn't care or was sure we wouldn't catch him. He even locked us out from the inside and kept searching without any hesitation. It showed how bold he was. It was embarrassing to see how easily he outsmarted us, making us feel helpless and foolish in our own place. We packed up our remaining belongings, deciding we couldn't spend another night in that house. When the police finally arrived, after what felt like forever, we felt a bit relieved. They took our statements but didn't seem very interested in what had happened to us. They said they would search the area, but their slow response was frustrating. They were surprised the thief hadn't been noticed, especially with the large glass windows all around the house. But I was just glad we were all safe. With the gunshot and knowing the intruder was armed, it could have been much worse. If we had confronted him, someone might have been shot or worse. It was a night none of us would ever forget, a stark reminder of how quickly a peaceful evening could turn into a nightmare. We left that house behind, shaken but grateful to be alive. I'm a grown man now, but I still remember the first time I stayed at an Airbnb like it was yesterday. This happened a few years ago, but it stuck with me ever since. Back then, I was just a student living with my parents and younger brother in a rural area. All I wanted was to move to the city. That was like a big dream to me at that time. It might sound silly to some, but when you're surrounded by nothing but mountains and trees your whole life, you start to wonder what else is out there. So, when it came time to continue my studies after high school, I saw it as my chance to finally get out and explore the city. We didn't have any universities where I lived, so I had to look in other towns. There was this one university I had my eye on, and I wanted to check it out before applying. The problem was, I didn't have a job and was living off my dad's paycheck, so money was tight. I couldn't afford a hotel, so I decided to try out Airbnb. I'd heard about it but never stayed in one before. It seemed like a good idea, and honestly, it was the only thing I could afford. The place was in a quiet neighborhood, kind of on the outskirts of town. I chose it because it was the cheapest option, even though it was a bit farther from the university. But then, I thought it would be fine for just one night. Turns out, that night was one I'd never forget. I got to the Airbnb a day before I was supposed to visit the university. It was late afternoon, and I was tired from the long bus ride. When I got there, the place looked way older and dirtier than I expected. Paint was peeling in large strips, and there were dark stains on the walls that I didn't want to think too much about. The whole place had an air of neglect, like it hadn't been cleaned in years. The furniture was old, the kind you'd find in your grandparents' house, and everything felt worn down. Honestly, even our house back in the countryside looked better than this. But I wasn't expecting much. It was just one night, and I figured I could handle it. Besides, it was all I could afford, so I didn't have much choice. I tried not to let it bother me. After all, I was there for the university, not for luxury. I dropped my bag in the small bedroom, which had just enough space for a bed and a dresser, and decided to take a quick look around. The kitchen was small and basic, the kind of place where you'd maybe heat up a frozen meal, but not much else. The living room had a sagging couch and an old TV that looked like it hadn't been turned on in years. The worst part, though, was this weird feeling I got as I walked around. It's hard to explain, but I felt like I was being watched. There was no one else in the house, obviously, but every time I turned a corner, I had this strange feeling like I wasn't alone. I tried to shake it off, told myself I was just tired from the trip and letting my imagination get the best of me. I didn't bother unpacking or anything. I just wanted to rest. I took a quick shower, got into bed, and tried to fall asleep. But as soon as I lay down, I started hearing noises. At first, it was just a faint creaking sound. I tried to ignore it, but then it got louder. It sounded like something was moving around upstairs. The problem was, there wasn't supposed to be an upstairs, at least not from what I saw. I told myself it was just my imagination, but the more I listened, the more certain I was that someone was out there with me in the house. I turned to the other side and closed my eyes, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But then I heard it again, clearer this time. Definitely footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, like someone was trying not to be heard. I got out of bed as quietly as I could and tiptoed to the door. I opened it just a crack and peeked out into the hallway. The house was dark, the only light coming from a street lamp outside that barely filtered through the curtains. I listened for a moment, but the footsteps had stopped. As I walked down the hallway, I shined my flashlight around, trying to get a better look at everything. That's when something caught my eye, something I hadn't noticed before. Right above me, there was a square outline in the ceiling, a small square shape that seemed out of place. I stopped, squinting up at it, and realized it was a door, like the kind that leads to an attic. I didn't remember seeing it when I first walked through the house. The square door blended into the ceiling, its edges barely visible in the dim light. But now that I was standing right under it, it was impossible to miss. My first thought was that maybe the noise I'd heard came from up there. For some reason, I felt this weird urge to check it out. Maybe it's because I grew up in the countryside, where you see all kinds of strange things, or maybe I was just too tired to think straight. Either way, I wanted to see what was up there. The door was too high to reach, so I grabbed a chair from the living room and dragged it underneath the square. Even with the chair, I needed something to push the door open. I found a broom in the kitchen and used it to push up against the square. The door creaked as it slowly swung inward, revealing nothing but darkness above. It was heavier than I expected. I had to use both hands just to hold it up. I started wondering how anyone could even get up there. There wasn't a ladder or anything, and the door was so damn heavy. It didn't make any sense. And then, just as I was thinking that, it happened. As I held the attic door open, a sudden chill ran down my spine. I looked up, and my heart nearly stopped. A pair of eyes were staring down at me from the darkness, cold, unblinking eyes that seemed to pierce right through me. I barely had time to process what I was seeing before the figure above slammed the attic door shut with so much force that it knocked me off balance. I fell off the chair and hit the floor hard, the broom clattering next to me. For a second, I just lay there, trying to catch my breath and process what the hell had just happened. My heart was racing, and all I could think was, what the fuck was that? I didn't stick around to find out. I grabbed my stuff and bolted out of that house as fast as I could. I didn't even bother closing the door behind me. I ran down the street until I was far enough away that I felt safe. I ended up spending the rest of the night at a 24-hour diner, just sitting there, trying to make sense of what happened. I couldn't leave town. I still had to apply to the university the next day. So I just waited there until morning, my nerves completely shot. When the sun finally came up, I went to the university, but I was so shaken up I could barely focus. I did what I had to do, applied, and got the hell out of town on the next bus. To this day, I have no idea who or what was in that attic. All I know is I'm never staying in an Airbnb again. I'm a 32-year-old high school teacher, and something really weird happened to me last summer. I know this might sound like something from a movie or a made-up story, but I swear, it's real. Even now, I still can't fully wrap my head around it, and honestly, if someone else told me this, I probably wouldn't believe them either. So, during summer break, I planned this road trip to visit my younger brother. He lives out of town and has been dealing with some health issues, so I wanted to be there for him. It was a 15-hour drive, which is brutal, and by the time I was halfway through, it was already late at night. I have astigmatism and wear glasses, so driving at night is a total nightmare for me. The glare from headlights makes everything blurry, and it's like I'm constantly squinting just to see the road. So instead of trying to push through and make it to my brother's place, I figured I'd stop for the night and get some sleep. I had planned to stay at an Airbnb halfway through the trip. The area didn't have hotels because it was pretty rural, just deserted land and a few houses here and there. It was the kind of place where you could drive for miles without seeing a soul, just endless stretches of open fields and the occasional rundown farmhouse. It was peaceful in a way, but also kind of creepy. So I was scrolling through Airbnb, and I found a few places with good reviews, but they were all out of my way. The ones that were on my route didn't have any reviews at all, which seemed odd, but I didn't have a ton of options. I was exhausted, my eyes were killing me, and I just needed a place to crash. So I went ahead and booked one of the rural houses that fit my schedule. I got there around 9 p.m. and I was exhausted. The place wasn't exactly on the main road. I had to turn onto a narrow dirt road and drive for what felt like forever, leaving behind any signs of civilization. It was just me, my car, and the endless dark fields. When I arrived at the Airbnb, a woman in her late 30s greeted me. Her name was Jessica. She was friendly enough, but something felt a little off about her. It's hard to put it into words. Maybe it was just the exhaustion playing tricks on me. But she had this weird vibe, like she was nervous or something. Anyway, she welcomed me in, showed me to my room, and told me to make myself comfortable. She mentioned that she lived in the house nearby and would be around if I needed anything. The house was quiet, but it was clean and decent enough. The furniture was a bit old, and there was a faint musty smell, but I didn't really mind. I was just glad to be off the road and finally in a bed. I locked the bedroom door behind me and put my stuff on the bed. The exhaustion from the long drive and my strained vision made it hard to stay awake. I crashed on the bed next to my belongings, hoping to get some sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night, feeling totally confused. I couldn't figure out what had woken me up, but I knew I heard something, like the sound of a car engine stopping right outside my bedroom window. Before I even had time to process what was going on, I heard the front door slam open so hard that the walls shook. My heart was pounding because I knew I had locked it before going to bed. The heavy footsteps pounded down the hallway, getting louder and closer with each second. I sat up in bed, my mind racing with panic, and then the door to my room, which I had locked too, was kicked once, then twice, and on the third kick, it flew open. There was a man standing in the doorway, his face twisted in fury. Even without my glasses, I could see him clearly enough to know I was in serious trouble. He was holding a shotgun in his hands, and he didn't even hesitate. He pointed it right at me, his eyes filled with anger. "Get the fuck out of my house!" he screamed, his voice shaking with anger. "This ain't no goddamn Airbnb. If you don't leave right now, I'll blow your fucking head off." I froze, completely terrified. My mind went blank. I couldn't understand what was happening. Jessica suddenly appeared behind the guy, her face pale and full of worry. "Jack, stop!" she pleaded, trying to pull the shotgun away from him. "He didn't know. I told you I was listing the house. We need the money." "That's not your decision to make, Jessica," he yelled, pushing her away. "This is my house, and I won't have strangers staying here." I slowly raised my hands, trying to show I wasn't a threat. "I'll leave," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll leave right now. Just please, don't shoot." For a moment, I seriously thought he might actually pull the trigger. His eyes kept moving between me and Jessica, but then, with a grunt, he lowered the shotgun a bit, though he still kept it ready. "Get your things and get the hell out of my house," he threatened, and walked away. I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed my bag and backed out of the room as fast as I could. As I did, I could hear them arguing down the hallway, their voices getting louder until I heard Jessica shout, "Get out of my house!" Then, I heard the front door slam shut and the lock click into place. Jessica came back toward me, still clearly pissed off. "I'm really sorry about that," she said, still breathing heavily from the argument. That was my brother. He doesn't want this house rented out, even though we both inherited it from our parents. We've been fighting about it for a while now. I'll give you your money back if you want. I shook my head, not wanting to make things more complicated. No, it's okay, I managed to say, still shaken by what had just happened. All I wanted was to get out of there as quickly as possible.